This episode of the HVAC School Podcast is brought to you by our partners. Refrigeration Technologies at refridgetech.com. Carrier at carrier.com. Diversitech at diversitech.com. Navac and navacglobal.com. If you haven't taken a look at the NRP 8DI digital smart vacuum pump from Navac, it's a brushless DC 8CFM vacuum pump with smart controls and an onboard Micron gauge. Some of you may ask, what's the benefit of an onboard Micron gauge? Well, it's actually really helpful. It allows you to test the pump before you even put it into use by just leaving the caps on and starting it up and seeing the ultimate vacuum. And it also allows you to see the pressure drop across your rig and gives you another reference to check your existing Micron gauges against if you suspect that they might have an issue. There's a lot of benefits from that onboard Micron gauge on the NRP 8DI from Navac. To find out more, go to navacglobal.com or go to truetechtools.com and use the offer code GETSCHOOLED at checkout for a great discount.
You know that friend who keeps interrupting your great story to adjust your facts? Just slightly? He's like that. Here's Nathan Orr.
Hey, this is the HVAC School Podcast. On this kind of short-ish episode, we're talking with Enginuity Power Systems. They are winners of the Sustainable Solutions Award from the AHR Expo. It's a really, really interesting, very new product, and you're going to want to listen to it because the way it works is super unique. It's going to be one of those things that's kind of a mind bender for you, and that's why I enjoyed it. So here we go. Nathan Orr is going to be talking with Enginuity Power Systems about their company and product.
I'm Nathan Orr with the HVAC School Podcast. We're here at AHR 2022. I am with Jacques Beaudry-Losique, the CEO of Enginuity, if I said your name correctly.
Absolutely. A+.
They won the Design and Invention Award here.
We won the Sustainable Solutions Award.
And then, right, you won 3 awards 2 years ago at the building show in...
We won 3 awards, including Best in Show at the International Builders Show in Vegas 2 years ago, here in 2020.
I was going to launch into what your product is, but you're obviously much more familiar than I am. I think it's a pretty exciting product. I would buy one. So anyway, if you want to go ahead with what it is, and then we can back up through there.
Yeah, we've built a family of cogen systems based on our secret sauce, which is a highly efficient opposed piston engine that by design is like 25 or 50% more energy efficient than a conventional engine and produces more power. So what's so special about it is that we can not only produce electricity from that engine, but we recover most of the waste heat. So almost all of fuel we get into an engine is converted into either electricity or heat. So it's far more efficient than your local power plant that produce electricity but send all that waste heat to the atmosphere. So it's a very green technology.
From a background standpoint of Enginuity, and for anybody who wants to know, it's not Ingenuity, it is Enginuity, like an engine. You are traditionally an engine company. That's where you're coming at this from, that you design high efficiency engines, correct?
That's correct. I mean, I would say the difference is our engines are fit for purpose to be run inside a house. They're very quiet, low noise, and extremely durable. So unlike most generators today, we don't use repurposed engines for other applications, but this engine was specifically designed to run inside a home or a small business or a building.
Yeah, if anybody is listening to this, I would encourage you to go to their website and look at the engine. It has a high coolness factor just to look at. And from the big thing from my standpoint, when I first heard, I guess we'll back up. The product, if I'm going to put it into how I would describe it, is a combination whole home generator or backup generator that's fit into the profile of a water heater and also serves that purpose on a day-to-day basis. Is that inaccurate at all? That's a fair description on the residential line, not so much the commercial or the military grade.
Yeah, that's correct. I'd like to call it the all-in-one appliance, like you said, with your furnace, your water heater, and your backup generator. But it's more than a backup generator because it can also produce power on demand. And in other places, in some places, you could actually completely replace power from the grid by using that engine in states, an area where power is very expensive.
That's always the payoff, is obviously that per kilowatt hour cost varies location to location. But if you're somewhere like California, for example, where you have a fairly unstable power grid, you have a power grid that's just maxed out, the payoff is going to be much sooner. And it is designed to run off of propane or natural gas. And so if you have a supply of that, obviously if you have no supply of that, then you still could get propane set to perform it. But it does have the capability of removing you almost totally off grid if that was what you were anticipating. Or like you had mentioned before we got going, there's an opportunity to do a buyback program for the energy you're producing.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't believe how much interest we get from our units or inquiries from California, Texas, or the Midwest, or even from Florida during natural disasters or grid outages. So the demand is out there. Our grid is unreliable in many areas of the country. We can get a payback by using our units. So we believe there's a tremendous market potential for our product line.
From a generator standpoint, it is designed to run off of natural gas or propane. One of the things that I really like about the design is because it is going to be running regularly. You don't have that thing, because we've been there. If you have a portable generator or even a standby generator, you don't have any power outages. You don't have a natural disaster. So what do? You do nothing. Then it comes time, a hurricane's coming, you go to turn it on and something doesn't fire. You need a spark plug. You need whatever you need for it. Then you're running down to try to find parts or find a supplier to install the parts right at the same time everyone else is. And you don't have it. And so you end up having purchased an expensive piece of equipment, paid a lot of money to get it installed correctly. And then the one time that you need it, it's not prepared to operate. And so that this is something that is designed and to have some payback towards you, depending on the area you're in, maybe entirely offset the cost of the initial piece of equipment in savings. It also functions as a backup or standby generator, and you'll know that it's running. And so you have that seamless, if you're having power outages or power problems, it's now not a power outage or a power problem.
You got that completely right. So our unit is designed to run about a quarter of the time, depending on the region, on and off, just like a regular appliance. So, you can count on your furnace, you can count on your different systems. And it's just like that for our products, E1 and E2. They will run all the time. So when you have an outage, it's just a way of starting it up at that particular time where you need power.
Correct. And I know that some of the initial just thought objection that people will have when they hear you're putting an engine in my house is that I get you're saying it's very quiet, blah, 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 but it's going to be loud. And from that standpoint, I would say looking up the specs and seeing it in person, this should be quieter than a heat pump water heater. A lot of our audience is familiar with that technology. And from a noise standpoint, it should be similar or quieter depending on the model of heat pump that you use and how much sound attenuation there is. It should be similar in noise or quieter than that. Is that correct?
Yes. If you and I were standing like 3 feet or 6 feet from the unit, we could have the same conversation as we're having right now. So think about your natural gas furnace, and it's about the same amount of decibel in noise. So it basically can be in your basement or your garage, and you don't really hear it in the rest of the house.
I actually wanted to back up. I did view your product yesterday, and when people think an engine, they always think of a traditional piston engine where they're sort of going up and down. You see this motion, there's a high vibration. And you described the piston system using a word that I don't remember because it's a new thing to me, because I'm not coming at this from an engine standpoint. I'm more of a traditional appliance standpoint. So what was that? And can you describe that difference in the piston? I'm blanking on the word that you gave me.
Yeah, it's an opposed piston engine design. So the pistons, as opposed to going up and down, they mirror each other and create the explosion in the middle when the piston hits each other. It provides a very even heat production and power production because of that. It also is designed to be surrounded by a water cooling system. It's very elegant, as I showed you yesterday. And that heat cooling transfer help really capture the heat far better than traditional engines. So that's what makes it like 25% or more efficient than traditional engines. Also, it creates a very low vibration system and low noise system, so the engine is very quiet and can last for a very long time. An ancestor of these engines was used like 50 years ago in aircrafts in the Royal Air Force, and these planes were known for last absolutely forever. So we've modernized the design so it can be retrofitted and used inside a home and be far more efficient in terms of overall efficiency and also reduced emissions.
Awesome. From a just base standpoint, what's going on is you have an engine here. It's an engine that is a generator, and you're taking all of that normally traditionally waste heat from the exhaust, from the engine, actually the engine heat it creates through friction and vibration and whatever, and you're recovering all of that into the water. And if for whatever reason that doesn't create enough heat, there is a backup electrical element that's powered by the energy that's being produced by the engine. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So that gives a lot of flexibility to the engine. So we recover the heat from the exhaust through a cooling loop. We recover the heat from the coolant system. And in case you need more heat, as you said, the generator can function and provide heat through a heating element that's also in the thermal storage tank that's just below the engine. So picture a slightly taller water tank in which the engine sits on top as part of the overall casing. And the whole system fits into a very nice compact, like a water heater footprint.
I know that when we were talking through, you were saying to minimize engine running, so you don't have to run the engine every time you require hot water. It is recommended that you install this with a backup battery system, an inverter, and so a traditional, the same thing you would do if you had solar power or something like that, but to allow the unit to run more efficiently so you aren't having to turn it on and run the engine every time somebody goes to wash a dish.
That's absolutely right. So for a 3,000 square foot home, we would recommend the 3 kilowatt hour battery to be part of the engine system. We design our system to be compatible with the solar industry standard. So it would integrate with the 48 volt batteries, for example. And you can also run our system in parallel with solar panels, for example, using the solar powering during the day and using our system during the night. You have peak power needs.
That would actually be sort of an ideal system throughout the day. You're generating power if you have the sun, and then if you don't, you have this in the background, because obviously it does consume on a very efficient basis, but it does consume fuel. And so from an installation standpoint, if you already have a gas or propane water heater in your home, there's not a huge difference in installation costs or anything like that between retrofitting this in. You're already going to have all of the utilities you need, with the exception of tying it in electrically to your home. And so putting in the backup battery, putting in a transfer switch, putting in whatever you're using to make sure that this can operate safely on that end.
Yeah, our E1 residential product is very simple. It is basically just a few connection, a hot water connection, cold water, natural gas, and an exhaust line. On top of that, it probably would be a relief valve on top as well. But we believe that the installation will last about 2 days with 2 technicians. So about the same as a heat pump.
And that's only on the initial install, because a large amount of that is getting the electrical set up. After that, if you were 15 years from now, you have this product that you love and you want to replace it with another one, everything will be in place and it becomes exactly the same as replacing a water heater. There's maybe a little bit more of a startup on the actual engine component, similar to if you were installing a heat pump water heater. Is obviously a little bit more complicated than putting in a traditional electric or gas water heater, where basically you plug it in and turn it on. There's probably going to be a startup period, a runtime, and anything like that, because it is an engine. And so you would treat it just like if you bought a new lawnmower or something. There's that initial startup period where you have to do things to make sure it's been broken in appropriately.
You're absolutely right, but it's actually an extremely simple system with very simple controls as well for a clean user interface. And our products are being thoroughly tested for easy initial commissioning and startup.
Awesome. So we've really been focusing on the E1, which is designed for residential applications, but you do make the E2 and the rigs system. The E2 is quite similar to the residential one, it's just larger, correct?
Yeah, the E1 produce 8 to 10 kilowatt, depending on whether you use natural gas or propane. The E2 will produce closer to 20 to 25 kilowatt of output. The E2 will be a bit different in the sense that it will be able to be also fully integrated to a water storage tank like the E1, but also we're looking at different configuration in which the generator and the storage tank are really completely separated and more customized to the needs of the business. So it's designed for businesses with high thermal needs.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So then going to the rigs, you want to tell me a little bit about that?
One of the features of our engine is that it has a tremendous amount of power density. So we pack a lot of power in a very small package. As a result, we're able to develop a generator that will be about half or less of the weight of current generator system for the Army, which, as you know, was be tremendously helpful for forward operating deployments, forward operating bases. Also, I think with the latest electronics, we're going to replace 3 family of generators, 2 kilowatt, 3 kilowatt, and 5 kilowatt with a single 2 to 5 kilowatt follow the load unit. Run it on the military fuel, a jet fuel called JP8. Therefore, it will tremendously reduce maintenance costs. Instead of having to maintain 3 different families, 2 different types of spare parts and everything, the military will be able to deal with that single family of generators. So there's a lot of interest from the Army and the other services, and we're very excited with our collaboration with the Army. They've been a tremendous supporter of Enginuity. By the way, we're the only U.S. company who manufacture engines of this size.
Oh, so you are an entirely built and manufactured here in the U.S., correct?
100%.
100% in the U.S. That's really great. I did actually, because I realized I hadn't hit on it, want to back up for a second where you said the 8 to 10 kilowatts. And so for people who don't feel like doing the math themselves, I was promised there would be no math sort of people. You're looking at that. So that translates to what, like, I'm going to do really rough math and you'll make fun of me because you're much smarter than me. That is about, if you were running on a 240 volt home like we have in the US, that's about, what is that, 31 amps? Is that correct? Or am I high there? Is that 31 or 21?
Right now, we're going to use like a 48 volt battery to go with that, with the 10 kilowatt system. So we're looking more at 200 amps, actually.
So 200 amps at 48 volts.
At 48 volts, yeah.
From there, that's easier math to go through from there. And
Exactly.
Once again, you are recommending, because that will be the thing, well, that's not enough to run. I like to run 10 refrigerators and I live in Texas and have 3 AC units. This is designed to run with a backup battery system, which helps you balance that load.
Exactly.
My home is 3,400 square feet. I have 4 children. There is sometimes a high load, but it's not generally as high as you imagine either. When I look at it, my peak amp usage is usually around 62 amps in a day, and it's for an exceptionally limited period of time. It's only if we're cooking, doing laundry, taking showers all at the same time, which with a family with 4 kids tends to happen all at the same time. But if you have a backup battery system to float you through that, it's still fairly appropriate. And in an emergency or natural disaster situation, maybe if you have exhausted the battery, just don't do every possible thing at the same time and you'll be fine.
That's absolutely correct, yes.
Hey, I want to take a second to talk about some of my favorite products on the market today. They're the JobLink probes from Fieldpiece. I talk about them all the time. They're in a lot of our videos. The JL3 KH6 kit, JL3 KH6 kit, JobLink from Fieldpiece, contains 2 Indux psychrometers, 2 pressure probes, and 2 rapid rail temperature clamps. It's a great kit. It's going to help you really test equipment well. It works with MeasureQuick. Those of you who are big MeasureQuick fans like we are, you can use it with MeasureQuick. You can use it with the JobLink app. And you can even use the temperature clamps, the rapid rail temperature clamps, in conjunction with the S-Man 380V manifold, if you're still into manifolds. And it works really well. So that way you don't have to have those wires if you don't want. The rapid rail technology is great because it helps you measure really quickly. You do have to clean the copper a little bit sometimes, which is true anyway. You really should be kind of keeping copper clean when you're going to measure at it. And so that's something you've got to make sure to remember to do when you're testing. But I think you're going to really like the JobLink kit. All of my technicians who have gotten it have really enjoyed it and have kind of turned to using that as their standard setup rather than using a manifold. Go to fieldpiece.com to find out more, JobLink probes, or go to TrueTechTools.com and use the offer code GetSchool to check out for a great discount.
Do you have, for people who are curious, because a certain percentage, our audience is mostly technicians, but also business owners and installers. I know you're not looking to sell directly to the public. It would be through a third-party distribution.
Yeah, distributors, manufacturing reps, and so and so.
That would be how it would get rolled out.
Yeah.
But from a business owner, I am a business owner, and I know from my end, the question would be about how much is this going to take to install? And do you have a rough idea of what those extra pieces cost?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
I know we had talked about it. You had said you were looking at installation cost, not including the unit and whatever markup a business owner would choose to add to it, but true cost is probably going to be around $2,400. Is that correct?
Yeah, we estimate at an average that the installation cost will be $2,500 without any additional complicating factors. So basically replacing your water heater, having the connection in place, natural gas or propane lines. And that does not include, of course, the cost of the unit itself or the extra battery if you choose so.
Right. And so this definitely not included in that is any of the costs of which would be there with anything else that you were doing that does. If you were doing solar panels or a backup generator or anything like that, you're going to have to buy the transfer switches. You're going to have to purchase the batteries. You're going to have to purchase the inverter in the case of a 48 volt output.
And you may need a small additional electrical box as well in your house. So there's a couple of items that could be an extra on top, but we believe that a straightforward installation will be of around $2,500.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I know you had said your background for several of the people in your company is working for the Department of Energy, correct?
A few of us have spent some time in the Department of Energy, and myself, I'm a chemical engineer with an industrial engineering degree. spent many years at the Department of Energy. I'm also a serial clean tech entrepreneur. And I was really attracted by this as being a very cool, energy efficient technology that can really help reduce greenhouse gases and save homeowners and small business owners thousands and thousands of dollars per year. So it's been one of the most exciting products I came across in my career. So that's why I'm here.
And that's pretty universal, right? That almost anybody that's interacted with the product has said it has, like I say, a high coolness factor, but also what I like about it is that it isn't unrealistically, where sometimes you see a product that has a very high coolness factor. Wow, this is awesome. But when you think of actual real life application, you can see that it's going to be hard to sell to someone, right? This is cool to me because I do this. And so this seems awesome. But somebody who doesn't, they just want the lights to come on and their house to be cold and their water to be hot or their house to be warm if you're in a cold climate. They don't really care about the rest. But in this, because you can see those things that people do care about, they see a lot of people now care about reducing emissions. Everybody cares about saving themselves money. And everybody, particularly if you live somewhere like I do in Florida, where natural disasters are a part of life, that you have that backup there that's functioning on it.
You have no idea, Nathan. You're so right. I mean, you have no idea how much interest we get in this unit from individuals during outages or after trade shows, after we won an award, for example, at the builder shows in 2020, or every time somebody sees the unit, basically they want one. So if I could make 50,000 units tomorrow, I could sell 50,000 units. And I'm kidding you not on that.
So the question that I had when we met at your booth the other day, because looking at it, I realized if I sent one of my technicians out to work on this, it doesn't look like anything you've worked on before. So who is the installer market you see targeted towards, the sales and target market? And also from a service standpoint, who do you see as being the ideal candidates to install, service, optimize this equipment?
Well, I think we're going to take it on ourselves as a company, I would say in year 1 or 2, to make sure that our company can really make sure that we can, quote unquote, train the trainers and train the installers. So we saw 2 family or 3 families of installers, basically that could get into this, like the plumbers, the electricians. I think we need both of them, but also the backup generator service technician as well. The extra work versus a traditional water heater is not enormous. Like I said, it's an engine, so typical engine. There's a very large oil compartment compared to the size of the engine, so we need to change the oil every year or 2. You tighten the belt, change the filters. So very little to be done. Also, the engine is running in very controlled condition between 65 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. And inside the home, so it's not exposed to all the vibrations you have in a car. So it will last for a very long time. So it also will be equipped to all the last whiz-bang, predictive maintenance software. So it start predicting when piece will break down and be able to send signal to installers and service providers to do that. Plumbers, electricians, and also, backup generator service technicians.
Any one of those people that's working on it. Of course, I always say, well, hey, see guys, we're all of those things. So we would be the perfect people to do it.
Problem solved.
Right. Problem solved. But particularly perhaps people that do refrigeration, you do work on things that, while it's still a traditional piston design, you are used to changing oil and doing that sort of thing. But yeah, so you're looking at something that every 6 months to a year, you're going to need to do some sort of maintenance on it. If it's being used as a backup generator more frequently, maybe you're looking at 6 months. If it's not, you're using it as a water heater, maybe once a year.
That's correct. Well, imagine that it'll be part of the same cycle that you and I probably do in our homes. To check up in the spring, check up in the fall, and then call if something breaks. So, I don't see any difference with our model with anything else, and nothing that the homeowner would notice.
From a durability standpoint, do you have a targeted lifespan that you anticipate these running, or how does that work?
Yeah, we target these units to run about 40,000 hours at an average of 2,000 hours per year, which is about a quarter of the time, which would give that a 20 years life expectancy.
Okay, so that's probably by the time you're hitting the end of that, even just from the water tank itself, you're starting to see enough aging that
exactly
it's time to go ahead and move along, which would be similar to any other water heater in the market.
Exactly.
What is the rollout time on this? If I was hey, I want to start selling and installing these, when do you have a target date for when that would be available from a production standpoint?
Yeah, we want to roll out. You want to need to completely commercially over the next 2 to 3 years. Regarding E1, that's our first product. We plan to take orders late this year for shipments in 2023. We'll build the initial units internally, and we're negotiating manufacturing partnerships to build tens of thousands of units we will need in 2023. So we hope to have those signed by the end of the year. We're targeting initially the markets that are, I would say, require a higher thermal load. So think about the Northeast, the Midwest, the Northwest, and also any area that lives in higher elevation. So think about the Lake Tahoe area in California. Think about Colorado, Arizona. Also think about all places which need a lot of heat, like home with heated pools anywhere, or areas where grid is not reliable and people want something better than their backup generator for just a little more money with tons more functionality.
Correct. And so anything where you can use hot water more than just to shower with.
Yes, exactly.
And so whether it's to heat a pool or you have in-floor heating, you have any sort of hydronic heating, this is going to be super ideal to that because this is really in market the most efficient way to generate hot water.
Yes, exactly. And an ideal home is also a home that's already hooked to natural gas or already uses propane, or working with new builders who are developing developments with that for natural gas and propane as well. New builders have a tremendous amount of interest for our technology, so we're working with them very closely because with new builders, you don't even have to deal with the cost of retrofitting and reinstalling. They can design the home around our technology from day one. So the payback is even better compared to traditional technology.
A question just out of pure curiosity from me is, because this is a new product, and in our market, when they first came out with fully variable air conditioning systems, the existing requirements for being qualified for any payback or government refunds or energy credits didn't really exist yet, or it took it a while to catch up to a technology because they always want to compare it to, well, what was this? And because I could see this system as being different, because what is it? Is it a generator? Is that something that you see as a market that you could get into where some of that initial installation cost is offset through tax credits or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, these incentives vary tremendously in state by state and region by region. There are already solid incentive programs in multiple states. We see that really expanding over time as the cost and greenhouse benefits of the technology becomes obvious to decision makers. But I think this is a very important factor. Unlike other technologies, our technology is designed to be profitable immediately today without government subsidies. So meaning we don't need any of those for penetration as other technologies like solar panels, thermal heat pumps, EVs have required. We do not require these incentives to be profitable. And for you and I, buy that unit makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, even in Florida, without a natural gas line, I have propane, but just for a few items in my house, it's something that I would purchase to replace my water heater, even though my water heater is fairly new, strictly from I live in Florida. And so having something that could keep my house running and I can get rid of the big ugly backup generator, it would be something that I would purchase and spend my money on.
We'll put you on the list.
Thank you. That wasn't what I was angling for, but thank you. And you're right, for sure, the market is there. You can see that this is something that people would want instantly. And the thing that I think people should realize, and I think people in Texas in the last few years realized it all at once, is that decentralizing power dependence is something that's happening. That is going to be the way the world looks moving forward. And so recognizing technology that you can do without a huge initial buy-in that starts giving you that ability to decentralize as population densities increase and power production is not keeping up, which I think we all see almost everywhere. Decentralizing that where you have control over your own source of power is something that people are going to have to start recognizing. And this technology, at least for me, feels much more initial install, and from a pure aesthetic to your property standpoint, there are advantages to this over something like solar where there's a huge initial cost. If you live somewhere like we do where there's hurricanes, there's a huge potential for it to get damaged in the same event that takes out your power. And you have a more on-demand ability regardless of what else is going on, unless your house gets destroyed, in which case, doesn't matter. Whatever you were going to do wasn't going to work. You're able to be independent or energy independent to a certain point.
Well, thank you. I mean, this is actually an extremely important point and an important factor in our business plan and our business model. I mean, I think the future is for distributed energy for a lot of the reasons you mentioned already, because of increasing amount of disasters and weather issues, and the aging of the grid is becoming more and more unreliable. And even when it's reliable, do you lose 5% of the energy produced from the power plant before it reaches your home? So it's a lot cleaner to produce your power on site, on location. There are also a lot of areas in the US and the world that have not very good exposure to solar energy. So we believe that this clean, efficient appliance could be a great solution. And think about that with the emergence of electrical vehicles that people charge at night and increased penetration of these vehicles over the next 10 years, the need for peak power will just increase over time. And what's producing these peak power needs? It's all fossil fuel power plants. Okay, solar does not produce peak power. It is only fossil fuel power plants. So we will replace that dirty energy with a much cleaner, much more efficient energy produced on site, much more cost effective. On top of that, because of this increase in peak power needs, utilities will need to plan to build billions and billions and tens of billions of dollars of more peaker plants. If you install a unit in-house and you have thousands and tens of thousands and millions of these units installed, then you don't need to spend these billions of dollars in power plant, and you don't have to build the associated transmission lines. So all in all, I think it's a much more economically efficient way to run an economy. And we look forward to our technology being part of a way to really transform our energy system, something cleaner and more efficient.
No, I mean, it's definitely very exciting. This feels, everybody says, oh, look for the win-wins. This feels like a win-win-win-win on all the points that you just made, that it's a win for the homeowner just from an immediate buy-off standpoint. It's a win from an aesthetic standpoint. It's a win from a larger taking care of our planet standpoint. It's a win from the utility companies. It's a win for everybody involved. I found the whole product super exciting. Even when I went and spoke to you and saw it, it was much more consumer viable to me than I was even anticipating. Where I looked at it and I was like, oh, for anybody listening to this and you're like, oh, this is going to be another cool technology that I'll never see, that it's great, but it probably won't happen. I'm not interested. It's a product that I could see this really becoming a whole new segment of home appliances, of home, like this combined appliance idea. It's untapped and it's also uncapped. There's not really anybody that I don't see that it wouldn't be a benefit to.
We are obsessed with simplicity and consumer appeal. We're ambitious, but we'd like to make that basically the iPhone of household appliances.
Awesome. Well, Jacques, this was a really fun conversation. I enjoyed this a lot. If anybody wants to look them up, you can go to Enginuity, Enginuity. Punch that into Google. It'll come right up with what they've got. They've got some really great videos on it that explain it better than probably we can without the visual component. I would encourage anybody to go watch it. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and good luck to the HVAC school.
Big thanks to Enginuity for coming on and talking to us, and AHR for setting up so many of these things. It was a great time. We learned about a lot of unique things. And if you're interested in Enginuity Power Systems, go to EnginuityPowerSystems.com. So sometimes people confuse Bigfoot with Sasquatch. Yeti never complains. Yeti never complains. Get it? Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time on the HVAC School Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the HVAC School Podcast. You can find more great HVACR education material and subscribe to our short daily tech tips by going to hvacrschool.com. If you enjoy the podcast, would you mind hopping on iTunes or the podcast app and leave us a review? We would really appreciate it. See you next week on the HVAC School Podcast.